Hey, are you hungry? Well, you're in luck. Meat and Three is back for season 16. I'm Taylor Early, and we've got a whole new batch of reporters I am so excited to introduce you to.
Hi, there. I'm Elizabeth Fisher.
Asha McElroy.
Sam Girardi.
Jessica Gingrich.
Hannah from Wisconsin.
I'm a swing dancing audio engineer.
I am a future registered dietitian nutritionist.
I'm from New York, and I love rice and beans.
My favorite food of all time is a shrimp burrito.
I love watermelon.
We've also got a bonus podcast for you called Behind the Internship. 3 of our reporters will take you along to show how they developed stories for this very show, Meat and Three.
Hi, I'm Danielle Flitter, a plant-based chef from Philadelphia, living in Mexico City.
I'm Sophia Hooper. I'm a bartender based in Portland, Maine.
My name is Addison Austin Liu. I am a chef and food journalist from Salt Lake City, Utah, and my favorite food is Peruvian.
Rice and beans.
Hand-drawn noodle soup.
So tune in to enjoy a square meal for your ears. And I hope you saved a little room for dessert.
This episode is brought to you by Fair Kitchens. Learn about the Fair Kitchens Code and join the movement at fairkitchens.com.
This week on Meat and Three, we're exploring food for the eyes, how the art and culinary worlds collide.
It's incredibly elaborate. It's a feast for the eyes, a banquet dinner with garnished ham, turkey, and an array of accompaniments.
We shot baguettes with paint dripping off of them with the blue, white, and red from the French flag.
Oh, what did the student tell me? They said the camera eats first. And it's so true. It's so true.
Tune in to Meat and Three, HRN's weekly food news roundup, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hi, my name is Eli Sussman, host of The Line here on Heritage Radio. I'm the chef and owner of Samisa Restaurant in Brooklyn. I started this podcast because I wanted to get better at my job. To become a stronger leader and a better business owner, you have to look to what others have done in their careers to get to where they are today. This podcast is about unpacking my guest's path to help find meaning and context about all the stops they made along the way. How do your old coworkers and bosses' culinary and leadership styles influence you? What do you take with you to the next stop, and what do you leave behind? What does each job provide for you in terms of creative and analytical growth? My guest today is Jay Wolman, the executive chef of La Lou in Prospect Heights, a recently opened wine bar from the team behind Fausto. Jay has come up through some of the most important kitchens in New York, and I'm looking forward to him sharing his experiences working extensively in the Tarlo family of restaurants, as well as working at Hart's in Brooklyn and King in Manhattan. In his food, he draws inspiration from French, English, and Italian cuisine and works heavily with produce he buys right down the road at the Green Market. Jay, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, man.
I'm excited that you're here because this is a cool evolution for this podcast because I've interviewed a lot of people that you've worked for and alongside of, and now you're here, the executive chef of a restaurant, talking about your own food. I've had Andrew Tarlo on, Katie Jackson from Hart, Claire and Jess from King, Christina, who was the chef at Renard's when you worked there, which is an Andrew Tarlo restaurant. So now we can just spend 45 minutes. You can give all the juicy details and all the backstory on all these places. I can just cross-reference what I learned from them. We're going to go through a lot of the spots you worked at and talk about maybe each one and what they mean to you. But before we get to the last 10 or so years that you've spent cooking in New York, let's jump all the way back to South Florida, where you grew up. Florida is a unique place. You're from right outside of Miami, the Miami area.
Yeah, I spent the teenage years of my life in Fort Lauderdale, which is just a little north of Miami. My parents actually owned a nightclub in Miami, which is what brought us down there. So I had a pretty unconventional childhood of spending weekends alone and hanging out at home while my parents were out partying, and that's Miami and its experience for me.
Did you grow up?
Skateboarding and getting arrested.
Come up in the nightclub?
I was certainly there when my parents were counting money that night. I was in the office, waiting for them to get off and then go and spend the day together on the beach. And occasionally, like skateboarding in Miami, getting arrested and having to call them for trespassing and all that sort of stuff
Was club culture something that was appealing to you, or was it the type of club that, like, when you were a teenager and a young adult, you didn't want to have anything to do with it?
I wanted nothing to do with it. I think the only part of it that was really like present in the house was music. I actually thought that was sort of the trajectory of what I was going to be doing, but we just always had music on in the house. But the actual culture of like partying and all that was so removed from what I am as a person and what I was as a teenager.
How did they get into the club world and the club scene?
Yeah.
You said that originally you were born in Houston.
Yeah.
So are they from Texas?
No, my parents are initially from South Africa, and they moved to the States. My father was in hospitality. His family comes from hospitality in South Africa, and they had started to look at opportunities here. And at the time, he was actually in the car industry. He had a few different jobs throughout his time, but yeah, they were in hospitality, and I think they always had a sort of draw towards entertainment. And I think they saw an opportunity in Miami as like a place to, it's a nightlife world. So.
Is it still around? Does
it's
the
not
club
still
exist?
around, no.
Did it have a long life in terms of clubs?
I think it did. I think they were in it for about 10 years, and then shady business partners and whatever pushed them out.
Sure.
I think they were a little tired, so.
I mean, a club in Miami doesn't sound like it. You probably rub shoulders with some characters that are unsavory.
There's just a lot of, like, liabilities, and it was fun while it lasted for them.
Did you talked about music a little bit, and obviously there's hospitality involved in a nightclub, but did that extend into the home? Were your parents entertainers, or were they kind of like did they keep that thing separate? Like their work was that, and then at home it was sort of maybe more quiet. And
yeah, I mean, it was funny because there was always like house music or something playing, because my dad was always sort of interviewing and meeting with DJs and listening to remixes and all of this sort of stuff. So there was always like loud electronic house music, but it sort of ended there. The entertainment was more just like friends over for dinner.
And did I get this information correct? Your parents were not super adventurous eaters.
No,
right?
They're still not. They're like actually horrible picky eaters, with no sort of love for fine dining or for going out. Really, they like what they like.
So they want like a plain chicken breast, and
yes.
their son is a chef and has
my dad is the pickiest eater I've ever met. With it's either like a well done burnt leather steak or a plain chicken breast, skinless, grilled with a baked potato with nothing on it. And I to be completely honest, I've never seen him eat anything outside of those two things in my 30 years of life.
That's crazy because, Miami, I don't honestly know what it was like, 15, 20 years ago when you were a young kid, but it is a vibrant food scene now.
Yeah, totally.
I know that I imagine that it had, some cool spots back in the day that that maybe your family didn't frequent, but do you have any childhood experiences or teenage experiences of like getting a Cubano somewhere, or whatever you may have engaged in as skating around Miami?
I mean, it was like a lot of, for me, it was some of those like fast, cheap bites, like jerk chicken on the side of the road, or a Cubano, or just like sort of the casual street food that we would find in downtown. But as a family, no, we would never sort of venture into any of that sort of cuisine unless my father was out of town. That was when we would make little like, let's go get Thai food together with my mom and my brother, or something that we just could never eat at home. We would often look forward to that because it allowed us to eat things that we weren't regularly having. So
I imagine because your parents were often out late that's the reason that you had a live-in nanny for a while, right? You had Violet, this woman that took care of you, and she was from the Caribbean?
Yeah, she was from Turks and Caicos, and she just like was my second mom for a lot of my childhood, and used to cook amazing food, and it definitely, like, to this day, I still think about some of those dishes she was making, and it's pretty
does that
influential. For sure.
Does that give you, that must have given you a unique perspective, because you're in Miami, which is a culturally diverse city, and then you have a woman raising you who is from the Caribbean and introducing you to probably stories and flavors that are not of your family.
Yeah.
And so was there any inkling in your early years of what you might, you mentioned music, but like did something creative seem like what you were going to pursue? Was there like a college path, or were you just like getting arrested and fucking around?
I mean,
it
wasn't that bad. It's just like the trespassing in Miami when you're like a teenager trying to skateboard on a university property at 12 at night.
Right.
It never goes well. But I always was sort of inclined to more creative work. I wasn't a great student in school, but I was certainly tactile and involved in the arts programs and involved in music production programs. And I thought that was really where it was heading. And I went to college for a little bit, and it just wasn't for me. That sort of show up on time and study things that weren't of interest to me just didn't really make sense, and I couldn't justify the price that my parents were paying for me to go to school when I had zero sort of interest in really pursuing any of those things, which then sort of brought me to New York.
And so you decide that college isn't for you, and you come to New York. You're thinking of maybe work that can be done that's with your hands. And did you end up at Cheeky Sandwiches right away, or did you pursue other jobs first?
So I moved here when I was 21, and I was working for Apple selling computers, and I was just like
in the store, you mean?
In the store,
okay.
Yeah, like working in the middle of Soho, dealing with crazy foreigners, honestly hating it. But they had good benefits, and I could pay my rent on time, and that was enough for me at that point in time. But I really wanted to start doing other work. So I went to Cheeky's, and I fell in love with this place. I don't know what it was that drew me in so much, but it felt like you weren't in New York, and it felt like so sincere. And the owner was there, and he was so sort of involved in the experience. And I was just drawn to it, and I wanted to be a part of that place. And I had very little culinary experience. But he was like, I like your energy. Why don't you come hang out here? So I started working there part-time, like making biscuits, frying sandwiches, po' boys, like fried chicken, and learning, even though it was very small, like learning how to make beignets and learning how to work with whatever was in-house. And then I quit Apple to go do that full-time.
Which, you were young and you could take a risk, but to leave a solid job to go work at, it was a sandwich shop. Yeah. Did people say, like, that's a crazy decision? Did your parents feel worried about you at that point? Did you feel a little lost, or did you think that this was a great path to go on?
I thought, for myself, that this was a good decision. I never sort of, I think growing up with my parents doing what they were doing and sort of their teachings of do work that makes you happy, I felt like it was the right decision. I think that they thought that it was just a hobby that I was interested in and would probably switch again. I didn't think they thought I was going to really take it seriously. And I think all my friends at Apple and everyone that I knew here was a little like, what the hell are you doing? But it sort of triggered some new inspiration in me. And
What exactly do you think it was about that place that, for people that have never been there, what was it about the kind of the DNA of the actual like physical location and the owner that grabbed you? Because of any place that you would have encountered in New York, I'm just wondering what makes someone quit one job in one field to just completely jump into another field.
I think it was a culmination of working for some place that was very corporate, that was, you know, I love Apple. I have an iPhone. I have an Apple computer. They're great products, but those businesses are so large that you sort of feel like a tiny ant in something. And then I came into this place that was so small and sort of, he didn't really give a shit about the decor, and all Din cared about was like, were people coming in there and leaving happy? And was it a place that felt sort of like safe, where you could be yourself and you could like hang out for as long as you wanted, and no one was worried about like turning a table or how loud or how explicit the music was. Like, that to me was so rare at this moment, and it felt refreshing.
I also love sandwiches as an entry point into food, especially sandwiches that take a lot of care in crafting them, because everyone eats sandwiches and they are an equalizer to a certain point. It's like the hamburger. You can have a $1 hamburger and a $70 hamburger. And you can bake the biscuit and you can do all the fillings and make all the sauces, or you can just, call Cisco and have everything delivered, right? There's so many levels to it. And it's interesting you said like you were making biscuits, which is actually a pretty difficult task.
It's actually not that easy, and they're very inconsistent.
Right.
So.
And so you while some might say like, oh, you got a job at a sandwich shop, you're actually launching headfirst into real cooking, which is not just, not to denigrate like an entry level line position, but you might just be like assembling product that someone has prepped for you earlier on in the day, right? You come to your station and like, there's definitely cooking and work that gets done, but you were baking. You were learning technique.
That little restaurant is so small that it required you to sort of be the salesman, the cook, the dishwasher, the prep cook, the guy that counts the money at the end of the night. Like, you were sort of forced to do it all, which when you think about like somebody who has no experience who wants to jump into it, it's kind of an amazing opportunity to have your hand in you have your hand in all the pots. Yeah,
you get to see immediately what things you don't like about being in a restaurant.
Exactly.
You say, wow, I hate dealing with customers.
Yes.
If only I could just be behind
the scenes,
behind a wall where no one can see me.
Totally.
Who's Chris Fisher, and what type of role did he play?
So to backtrack a little bit, while I was still at Apple, I met this dude selling him a computer. His name was Luke. I had already sort of started voicing interest in cooking. I don't know what was the turn, but I had the interest. And I met this guy while I was selling him a computer, and he threw a great sort of conversation about how filthy his sheepdog was. I was like, "Where are you from? And what's up with your dog?" He told me that he was from Martha's Vineyard, and he spends half his time here and half his time on the island. And I think we just sort of had a connection. And he was like, you should reach out to my friend Chris, who's doing some really cool stuff on the island. So I emailed Chris. He was a chef and a farmer on the vineyard. And I just went out to visit him with a couple friends of mine. And it was truly the sort of, that was the turn for my career. I met him and I was immediately influenced by what he was doing. He was cooking on his family's property. He was, harvesting and raising all his own livestock and growing all his own food, and then having these amazing greenhouse dinners on the property for people that lived on the island or were visiting, or celebrities, or even just for like fishmongers in trading. Like, we'll give you fish and we'll cook you dinner in return.
Did you end up working for him?
I did, yeah. I spent some time with him, sort of seasonally, which was really just, an idyllic place to learn how to cook.
and all these, little moments that we can pull out over, the course of your life and your career, but you connected with Andrew Tarlow there, right?
Yeah. So
he shows up, and what happens?
So essentially what happened was Chris was like, in no disrespect to Cheeky's, if you really want to be a cook, if you really want to like do this for real, you got to get out of the sandwich shop and you got to go to a real restaurant. And I was scared of doing that because I had no culinary, college experience. I was sort of unsure about knife skills and what it was going to look like entering a busy restaurant, especially at that time when you think about like Marlowe and Diner in the early 2000s were like all the rage. And why would they want to hire me when everybody wants to work there? But fortunately, Chris and Andrew had a pretty good relationship, and he introduced me. And he was like, this is the only place in New York City that cooks the way that you're thinking about food and the way that we cook, similarly on the island and using the best sourced ingredients that you can find. And through that connection, I trailed and I got the job.
What was that first day, week like when you come into a very hot restaurant where people are coming from literally all over the United States to go work there because it has the aesthetic and the ethos that they're still looking for that, but at that time people were saying, where do I go to break down a whole animal and then use all those parts and everything on the menu? And we do all our own baking here. Like, it has all those pieces that people were excited about. It feels intimidating, right?
Totally felt intimidating.
What are those first days and weeks like?
I started off as an oyster shucker, and that was it. And that alone for me was enough. I was just so excited to be involved and to be around people that wanted to be there. I, slowly started learning how to make basic things, Spanish tortillas, and having my hand in any garde-manger prep, and just volunteering myself to all of the cooks, the chefs, the sous chefs, like kind of being a pest. And I think at first they were probably all like, who the hell is this kid? But then it sort of, I think that a lot of the people there had come up in a similar path. So I think they saw themselves in me, and they were willing to sort of give me the chance to grow and to learn there. So it wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be.
There's something to be said about that point, which is, you were at this spot where you were doing everything and learning a lot, but to go to a place where there's a lot of cooks around and people that are interested in bringing their own ideas, even if you were just shucking oysters, just by osmosis, like hearing what's going on in the kitchen and learning about spacing and timing and all those things.
It was fantastic. It was like the most that you could ask for as a very green cook, like sitting in on a menu meeting every single day, even though you weren't contributing to it yet. To be able to sort of hear how my sous chefs would think about food, and how Ken, who was a chef at the time, would think about what we have in the walk-in and what we can make do with it. And that, it starts lighting off ideas in your little brain of like, oh wow, this is how these guys do it, and I can't wait till I'm at that point where I can do that.
I want you to think back now to that first 6 months again, and I want you to think about actually like non-kitchen and non-food related things that you may have learned then that you didn't realize until maybe even now that you're in charge of a kitchen. Are there things that feel like leadership oriented or organizational that maybe you didn't realize at that time that now you look back on and think like, wow, this was even a non-culinary education as well in those first couple months?
I definitely do. I think it goes back to that sort of topic of inclusion, and that those kitchens were quite egoless. And I think in so many professions, not just kitchens, but taking your ego out of it and looking at your team as a whole and trying to include everyone is really informative, and something that I'll carry with me for however many things come ahead. Like leading a team is about you're only as good as them, and everyone has an idea and an opinion and should be heard. And I think that at Andrew's restaurants really preach that. And sort of everywhere I've tried to go from that point until now, I feel like has a similar ethos.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more about you working around Brooklyn, jumping over to Manhattan, and of course, your new role as executive chef. Stick with us. We'll be right back here on The Line with more.
This episode is brought to you by Fair Kitchens. The food service industry faces a challenge. More people are eating out, yet restaurants are losing talent. Why is this? Research by Fair Kitchens reveals a serious well-being issue within professional kitchens. 74% of chefs are sleep deprived to the point of exhaustion. 63% of chefs feel depressed, and more than half feel pushed to the breaking point. This can't be ignored. Fair Kitchens is a movement based on the belief that a positive kitchen culture makes for a healthier business. By taking the pledge to be a fair kitchen, they'll provide you with free information, tools, and resources to help you take action towards making your restaurant more stable, productive, and happy, which positively affects the guest experience. It's time to act now. Learn about the Fair Kitchens Code and join the movement at fairkitchens.com.
Welcome back to The Line. My guest today is Jay Wolman. Before the break, we were talking about him leaving a sort of a normal job and going to work at a sandwich shop and then jumping into real professional cooking by joining up with the folks over at an Andrew Tarlow restaurant and really digging in. And so you continue with the Tarlow group, and you've worked at a bunch of places, but you worked at Renard, and Christina Leckie was the chef there when you were there. That place, although a Tarlow restaurant, it's in a hotel. It's now swapped to some other restaurant group, but in the Wythe Hotel, sort of a sprawling F&B operation, right? Much different than a diner where it's a tight team.
Completely opposite.
And so what was that like, working within the Tarlow family, but working at a hotel restaurant, which has a different set of needs and responsibilities attached to it?
It was a different beast altogether. But I felt like I sort of, having worked at Marlowe and Diner for so long, and then having spent some time at Roman's with Frank, I needed to see it. And I needed to see what it was like to be in a much bigger place. I had never experienced that. And I adore Christina, and I thought she was so talented as a chef, and I loved what she was doing. And I had been friends with her with her time at under April, so I was quite familiar with who she was. And I thought that the pairing of Andrew's sort of restaurant mentality with Christina's talent was something that I needed to be involved in. But to be honest, like, that scale of a project is not for me. It's just that the space is massive, and the room service and just all of the demands of a property of that scale I prefer smaller.
Do you think that something gets lost, even in a group that has so much control over quality and sourcing, and they're very vertically integrated, right?
Of course.
And so it is just extremely difficult to satisfy all those demands and make a profit and retain staff. So, like, were there things that you saw there that that you maybe thought, like, well, if the Tarlow group can't do it, like, nobody can? Or do you think it was like there were unique issues to the hotel? What do you think?
I mean, I think that there was issues just with agreeing on, like, what you believe in versus what the property demands of you.
Mm-hmm.
transparent. I was there sort of towards the end of that relationship. And I sort of helped them as they were transitioning over to new ownership, which was also very interesting and informative to sort of go from knowing a style of management for so long to being in a holding period to then being introduced to the new chefs that were coming in and who were also friends of mine, but had a very different sort of mentality of how they were going to run this business. And sort of having such a loyalty to Andrew for so long and hearing other people saying, well, we don't want to do it like this anymore and we don't agree with it. It's sort of, well, I'm here right now. What side am I on? So it was interesting.
You have spent time, obviously, in the restaurants that we've talked about, where the Turkell kind of aesthetic, led by the chefs that he hires, is like kind of unfussy plating, very ingredient focused. Yeah. Hearts, Servos, The Fly. A lot of those people worked for Turkell. You can draw clear distinctions,
you can see it.
And that they are of the same school of thought. And then also at King, where in more maybe a slightly more elevated dining experience, Manhattan, a white tablecloth, a little bit fancier, but still like really ingredient focused, not overly plated and fussy. It seems like you are over time really narrowing in on what the style of cuisine that you like.
Yeah. And I think that was sort of obvious from the get-go. Like, I knew what I wasn't, and I knew what I liked. So I went to Hearts with Nick, who was one of my sous chefs and sort of acting as a CDC when I started at Marlowe and Diner. And I related so much to his food, and particularly like his direction of Mediterranean-driven food. That when the opportunity for Hearts came up, I jumped to it. And then unfortunately some personal issues came up and I had to step away. But then I ate at King when they recently opened. And I had heard about them and I was fond of the River Cafe and I spent some time in London, so I was familiar with these restaurants, and I ate there and I was just so impressed by how audaciously simple it was. And I begged them for a job. I was like, I have to be a part of this. And I actually like harassed Claire and Jess. I think they were like, what is your deal? But then they were in a pinch and they called me, and I was honored to be like involved in that project. It felt like so similar and so familiar from what I was already used to, but also quite different, and a very different group and a young entrepreneur sort of mind frame, and working with all females. And it was a really awesome opportunity that I look back on, and I'm still like very grateful for having been a part of that place for while I was there.
Does anything about King feel risky to you? Like the fact that it wasn't overly plated and that there aren't 40 components on the plate?
100%. I think that the thing about a place like King is you either get it or you don't. And I think a lot of people that I've sent over there have been like, I don't know about it. But I think if you get it, you understand, wow, they like really know how to cook beans. Or this quail is perfectly grilled and it just has one thing on it, but it's sort of only about the quail. And if you're looking for more, if you're looking for like crazy bursts of flavors, then that might not be the spot for you. But I think that they take risks for sure. And they sort of pay homage to what they know and where they came from. And that's very special to me.
A lot of the places that you've worked, it seems like they've either intentionally or unintentionally like followed that I want to be a neighborhood restaurant path. A lot of them have been elevated far beyond a neighborhood restaurant. I mean, Diner is one of the most important restaurants in America, right? Yeah. But it is, in fact, a neighborhood restaurant that people that live close by treat as such and go there several days a week. Same thing for King, even though it's at a higher price point, right? Yeah. I'm sure that you saw regulars that are there a couple days a week.
Totally.
And Hearts as well, which is actually near where I live, like Bed-Stuy, Crown Heights area. Like that's a neighborhood vibe place, even though it was on, the Bone App hot list and received a lot of accolades. Do you think that, are we having like a resurgence of the neighborhood restaurant vibe now, or has it always been apparent?
I think that it's always been apparent, but I think that it's changed. I think that it's no longer the little mom and pop place. It's now like the talented new generation of chefs that want to have something that feels honest and sincere and isn't on a grand scale. I don't think Andrew ever anticipated Diner becoming what it was. I think he just wanted to create a place that was for him and his friends and for the people on the block. And I think that sort of sets the pace of what a neighborhood restaurant now looks like. And I think Nick with Hearts, I know from our discussions, that was always his intention, was it has to be for the neighborhood. And we have to provide something that people around here want to come and eat at. And I think King, in a strange way, it's the same thing. And it's certainly with La Lu now, I think that's part of the plan. And I think that's part of how, when you open a restaurant these days, you should be thinking about that.
At every place you've worked, it seems like you've made not super aggressive, fast, like incremental changes to the way that you work. Like it seems like you're a guy that like bides his time and learns a lot and soaks up a lot. But you have been like gradually promoted every sort of time and every place that you've moved. For someone who's listening to the show who maybe is like a line cook now or a sous chef, and they're thinking about like, how do I make it to the next step? Like what are the moves that I can make? And they're maybe thinking about staying or leaving. What determinations factored into your reaching for that next level and either staying or leaving?
I think it's a matter of believing in yourself and sort of looking at what you're doing versus what the people around you are doing and saying, honestly, like, am I ready? And if I'm not ready, what's it gonna take for me to be ready for this next move? And is this place, have I reached the ceiling here? Do I need to see some new perspective? Do I need to like give it more time? Do I need to be more patient? Do I need to be more aggressive? I think that's sort of part of working in small restaurants is understanding that there's only so much. And sometimes you have to branch out a little bit if you want to get to that next step. And the timing might not work out, that the opportunity's there for you. So I think for me, it was always like staying at a place and seeing it through and learning the most I can from that place in that particular moment. And then when I felt like I was ready for more, then it was time to explore some options.
So what specifically drew you to your current restaurant? What about the location, the style, the ownership, the focus on wine? Like, talk about any elements that made you feel, okay, I'm ready. This is the next step that I'm going to take.
Totally. And it was my first executive chef role. So I was certainly like eager to find a place that made sense. I think the first automatic thing was the scale of the property. It felt doable. It felt familiar for me. 50, 60 seat restaurants are sort of my sweet spot. So I felt like, I know what I'm doing here. I can jump into this, and it's not going to be so much of an obstacle for me. It's not like a Reynard where there's so many moving parts. It was just sort of like, let's get in here, let's figure it out. I'm a big fan of natural wine. I feel like everybody in Brooklyn is right now, and sort of happening everywhere. But the sort of combination of the food I like to cook with a focus on natural wine made a lot of sense to me, and I was really interested in the project. And having met with Joe and Alyssa and Dave, and sort of getting to know them as people and understanding where they were drawing inspirations and how they wanted their businesses run, and I felt a connection with them and felt like this could be a good relationship happening here. And yeah, it was just a really awesome opportunity at a great time that I wasn't super scared about. I was like, I feel like this is time for me and I'm ready and I can take this place to the level that it needs to go.
I want to talk about the menu and some of even maybe the additional challenges that you faced, because just menu creation for any restaurant, there's so much that goes into it. It's not just what will people buy, what do I want to cook, what tastes good, what can I craft so that my food costs are right. But you have, in my opinion, an additional layer, which is you have to have a menu that people can both order one or two things as a snack, but also be able to create a meal out of if they want, or, you know, with some direction from the service staff. So how did you conceptualize your menu of being able to blend all those elements? Was that challenging for you?
Honestly, it wasn't. I think about like how I like to eat, and I think about the early days of Marlowe sort of being in a strange way, like kind of a wine bar. Like we used to all serve smaller dishes and then you'd go over to diner for a bigger meal. So I thought about that, and then I thought about Estella, and I thought about restaurants in London that I really like Rochelle Canteen, that serves sort of smallers, and their menus sort of transcend into larger plates if you want to go that route. And I just sort of looked at some books and figured out, like, you know what, my food that I want to create is for sharing, and it's not necessarily like large gluttonous food. It's like certainly demands some bread, and there's a lot of oil, and there's a lot of just sort of get your hands in it, but you want to do it with a group of people, which I think made sense with the space, and going with a wine and pairing things with wine along the way. And it was actually probably the easiest part for me.
What's one dish that you have on right now that you're really excited about? Can you describe it and sort of take us through some of the components of it?
Sure. We have... I love seafood, so I think these funky wines that we're serving goes really well with seafood right now. So we have some head-on prawns. We're getting these beautiful Carolina prawns through Greenpoint Fish, who I've worked with exclusively for a long time. We just marinate the shrimp in paprika and garlic and bay leaves, and a little controne pepper, and we broil them until they're nice and charred. Serve them with some wild mountain oregano, a lemon wedge, and a little aioli, and it's just oily, and like your hands are in it, and it's so delicious. It's so simple, but something about it, like, what more do you need?
There's an element of being the executive chef that you're at the top. It's a little lonely. You're kind of the last line of defense. Of course, you can go to the owners with questions and concerns, but who do you, now that you've got the leadership position, who do you reach out to, peers from folks from your past, where you've got questions and issues that you want to bounce things off of them? Who are those folks that you go to?
I mean, it's all the people we talked about.
Yeah.
I believe in, like, no matter what happens, like, never burn your bridges. And all of the relationships that I formed over these past 10 years in these kitchens, I still consider all of those people my dear friends and mentors. And I remember when I got this job, I went out with Nick Perkins immediately for a drink, and I picked his brain as best as I can. And he was so open to just talking about it all with me and being like, just do it, what are you afraid of? And understand this and remember, like, what we did here. And I've reached out to plenty of people, just, hey, like, how do we do payroll like this? And just asking for honest advice. And no one has come back and been like, you don't know that by now? So yeah, just like friends.
It is always, there is that moment when you've got the keys to the car and you think to yourself, all right, well, I've got to go forward. It feels like there's a vast you can go in any direction, and you have to kind of focus and center yourself. On that first day when you had the ability to kind of just go forth, did you have a plan? Like, did you think to yourself, oh, wow, I've been building to this moment and like I'm super ready? Or did you almost have to press pause and just regather yourself and figure out how you were going to move forward?
It was a bit of both. You know, I was like headstrong and eager about getting in there and putting on a full new menu that was all me. But there was also the reality that there was an existing team in place, and there was an existing menu, and those things don't happen overnight. So as ready as I felt, there was sort of a slap of reality of like, oh, there's some other fixing you have to do first. And getting acquainted with the space and getting acquainted with the setting up new purveyors and all that work, it takes the romance out of it a little bit. It's like, it's not all just about putting on a new menu and cooking your food. Like, there's so much other stuff that comes first in having a successful restaurant. And, you know, I think that was sort of a moment of like, oh shit, I'm the boss, but there's a lot of other stuff to this now.
I think that's super important for people to hear that may think to themselves, like they're maybe a sous chef and they're like, I just can't wait till I have the ability to put on my menu. But there's so many other elements to the job. It's, you know, making the dishes and then executing them and teaching the staff how to cook those dishes is honestly quite a small part of the job.
Yeah.
There's so many other pieces to cover. So on that, I wonder, what is sort of a normal schedule for you like? And also, if you can be thinking about it in the back of your mind, what was it like to come into a place that had an existing team? There was front of house and back of house that existed there. The restaurant had been open before you came in as executive chef. So what was it like to work with folks that already had an idea of how things worked? And then what is a normal day or week like for you, sort of?
In terms of coming in there, like, the previous chef, I applaud for having gotten the place up and running and getting people in there, and they had quite good success already. So I'm thankful for that. And the team that was in place, you know, I'm particular about who I work with. Like, there's no secret there. So it was challenging for me. I was working with cooks. I had no clue, like, where they'd come from, and they didn't know about me, and our styles were quite different. But as these things go, like, changes are made and things phase in and out, and started bringing on people of my own, of friends of mine who I'd worked with, and immediately started to sort of see a shift in the food and sort of in the culture and my style of management. And I think that the team that was already in place there from the front of house, they're all still there, and they're all pretty amazing people, and the management was amazing, and Dave's there, and, you know, really supportive from Joe and Alyssa and Dave as a whole to sort of get it to the restaurant that I needed it to be from my side of things. So that was, you know, it happened a lot faster than I thought it would. In terms of like my day to day, you know, I'm getting there pretty early, like, and spending the whole day there. And it requires doing invoices, and it requires looking at emails and all the things that I don't really like doing. But the reality is like, it's on me to do them. You know, I like, since my Apple days, I hate computers. But I didn't know like how to make a spreadsheet. So learning all of that stuff, now I know how to do it. And the food, we just sort of, I go in the walk-in and I look around. And what we have is what we have. And some nights we're running duck breast and some nights we're running duck legs. Like, why order more if you have stuff in there to sell? And that's the way I learned how to cook, is like, make every cent on what you have before you order more. And sometimes, like, you might run out of things, but that's sort of the only way my brain thinks about food these days and about writing menus, is like, what's at the market, what's in the walk-in, what makes sense right now, and what can we do with it that's exciting and that people are going to be like excited about.
what's the most satisfying part of the job for you? We just talked about some of the parts that are rough and that you don't like. What to you is the most, inspires the most happiness in the job for you?
I think it's a little bit of the validation that comes with it. It feels good. I have people now that like want to work there. I have, people that I've worked with in the past or friends that have heard about it or whatever it is that are like, I want to be a part of this. And that makes me feel like when I was going to diners saying like, I want to be a part of this because of like what you guys are doing and how you cook. And I feel like now I'm in that place where I've created that environment and that culture and are cooking that style of food. And that feels really good. And it sort of pays homage to how I learned. And then just being in like an open kitchen and getting to see how people are reacting to the food, it feels pretty awesome, like seeing clean plates every night. I think so much of working in kitchens, like we feel like we're unsung heroes so often because we don't get to feel that other side of the experience, and we're just working, and we don't see like how people are reacting to our work. So being able to see it makes it all worth it. It's like, sure, my day's long and my back's sore, but people are loving the work that we do day in and day out. And I'm working with people that are talented and want to be here and have ideas and can contribute. And it's just like, it's awesome. Couldn't ask for more right now.
In terms of sort of initial victories, it's like having people come, being satisfied, having the right staff, creating a culture that's positive. Like these are all amazing steps in your first role and in your first year. And I know that you just said that you are satisfied, but I wonder what might be like a tangible goal that you have set or that you are thinking about setting for maybe year two. And as you go forward and continue to refine operations and the food, like where do you think it could go for you and for the restaurant? And is there something tangible that you're looking towards?
Yeah, that's kind of a tough one. I feel like I just want to have, obviously I want the business to be profitable. I think that's first and foremost, so we can all continue to do it. But I think I'd like it to be a place that it's a neighborhood restaurant, but it's also a place people are talking about and coming from out of town and visiting. And that's sort of my goal of creating a place that people they know about and they have to check it out. And I think from our side of things, like I would love to do whole animals. Like we've started experiencing what it looks like to get in whole goats, and maybe we can branch off and do whole pigs because I'm super into that sort of that ethos of using the whole animal. And it's a small restaurant. Like, let's be real, the walk-in's tiny, but figuring out a way to push it as we grow, and sort of push the envelope of what we can do on this small scale, but still not let that restrain us too much, I think is sort of my next big picture goals with Lalu.
Let everyone know where they can find the restaurant. What's the address? If there's a website, where can they go to check you out?
The address, it's in Prospect Heights. It's 581 Vanderbilt. And the website, I believe, is lalubrooklyn.com.
Cool. Jay, thanks so much for being here and sharing your story.
Thank you so much, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to speak with you. Everyone go check out the restaurant, open 7 days a week.
7 days, and we're open for brunch too. I would say it's not like your typical brunch. It's more of like a European lunch, which I hate brunch. So for me, European lunch makes a lot more sense. And we're doing some pretty fun, tasty food over there. So
everyone go check them out. And you can find this and all the episodes of The Line on Heritage Radio Network or wherever you find your podcasts. We're going to be off next week, but come back and find us in 2 weeks, Tuesdays, 11 a.m. here on Heritage Radio. The Line is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at heritage_radio. You can also find us at facebook.com/Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners just like you. Want to be a part of the food world's most innovative community? Subscribe to the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join the HRN family by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. Thanks for listening.
I want to tell you about a new podcast called Amuse News. Publishing multiple days a week, Amuse News is your source for food news, interviews from around the food world, and more. On the show, we'll be engaging with food storytellers, from chefs to advocates, to people working in the field, and many more. Find Amuse News wherever you get your podcasts. Amuse News is a destination for everyone who's looking for a new, insightful look into the world of food.